Okay, well, thank you so much, first of all, for having us. We're so grateful for the invitation. You're going to hear some things about human trafficking that maybe you know, that maybe you didn't know. You might come away disturbed, you might come away shocked, but you will come away educated, and that's the goal. We want everybody that we can get in front of to understand what's happening in Connecticut with human trafficking and how they can be a part of the solution. So with that said, we're just going to, I'll introduce our team. Nadine Thomas, she's our executive director. And this is Sarah, she is our volunteer coordinator. So we're glad to have them with us. So we are the Underground New England, we connect communities, we empower survivors, and we rebuild lives. And so this is just going to go over a little bit about who we are, first of all, so you understand about the Underground, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of human trafficking in Connecticut. So we are a faith-based nonprofit organization that seeks to eradicate human trafficking in Connecticut and all of New England. We started in 2012 as a ministry based out of a church in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And along with 8 other churches, they used to go down to the Berlin Turnpike and pray because we knew that was a hotbed where human trafficking was happening. And so that's how we were founded. And we started out doing awareness programs just like this all over the state, but very quickly learned that there were very few services for adults in Connecticut. And so out of that gap, we formed our adult mentor program, which you'll be hearing about in a little bit. So our mission statement, as you can read, is to eradicate human trafficking in Connecticut, New England, through awareness, prevention, and intentional survivor support. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Everything is based on Isaiah 61:1. That is the verse the Lord gave us when we started this ministry and this mission. And so the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort those who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. They shall build up the ancient ruins, they shall raise up the former devastations, and they shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations. And that's what we're doing. We're rebuilding the lives, who for some of them, this is a long-standing generational problem within their families, etc. So if I could just pray before we continue. Heavenly Father, I just thank you. We thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We know that this human trafficking is not your will. We know that human trafficking denigrates those who are born in your image, Lord. And so I just ask that we have ears to hear and eyes to see, and then we can pray. Okay. So our vision is to transform a culture of human trafficking and exploitation through the healing love of Christ Jesus. To provide intentional survivor support that will pave a pathway for those that we serve to be whole once again and restored. To educate and sensitize our communities through awareness events such as that, like we're doing today. And we're always a ministry and a mission that seeks to glorify God in all that we say and do. We're a community that strives to be the heart, the hands, and the feet of Jesus to those we serve. And we do not proselytize to our clients. We serve clients of every faith, every color, every nationality, whoever needs services and who has been human trafficked in our state, we serve. And we're people of integrity and honesty as demonstrated in our actions and our words. So this is our pillars of impact, just briefly. 4, awareness, things like we're doing today. Prevention, we provide prevention tools to engage and equip the community in action against sexual exploitation. Survivor support, we have our adult mentor program. Through our team of trained mentors with lived experience and training, we provide stellar survivor care services to our clients. And I think it's important to highlight that we meet the physical, emotional, psychological, social, and spiritual needs of our clients by providing advocacy, assistance, and support. We have 3 full-time mentors that work with our clients intensively. So when we get a client, we get a referral, the mentors are the first people that go in and assess, and they will walk with those clients until they are free and independent. And then freedom partners, that's you. That's our churches, our corporate agencies, our organizations, and individuals who come alongside us knowing that we can't do this hard work on our own. So I do want to say, before we move any further, that some elements of this presentation may be really hard to hear. They may be really hard to see. And so we always like to say, if there's something that bothers you, if there's something that has been a trigger for you, if there's something that has just disturbed you to the point that you need to take a break, please feel free to get up and leave and just, have a quiet moment with your, to yourself and come back when you're ready. But we do just want to let you know that a lot of people haven't heard this before, and there's, we encourage you to make sure that you take care of yourself throughout this presentation. I'm going to turn this over to Nadine, and she's going to talk with you a little bit more now about human trafficking in Connecticut.
Okay, thank you so much, Lori. Can I sit? Yeah. So we can have conversation, because usually when I stand, I teach. Sometimes I preach, but I just wanted to have conversation today about human trafficking in Connecticut, and I just want to reiterate what Lori said and emphasize, if this may be a little overwhelming, it may be triggering. Hearing about and working with human trafficking every day. And even though neither of us work directly with survivors, we get feedback. So we hear the stories, we hear the concerns, we hear the challenges, we hear the wins too. And it really does affect us. A few nights ago, I had a dream of someone being trafficked. And it puzzled me. And then I realized that, Nadine, you're in this. And so it does something to your person, especially when your heart is in it, when you're full of compassion for these individuals. And so I just want to just emphasize what Lori said. It is real. So please, if you're feeling overwhelmed, just take a walk, take some deep breaths, and just come back with us. So, because we really need to talk about this. Now, when we talk about human trafficking, we love to ask a question, and we'd love to hear your responses. What is the story you tell yourself about human trafficking? So there are so many stories about human trafficking, and a lot of times when we ask these questions, we hear one of the answers we hear is it Sound of Freedom? Sound of Freedom. Anybody watch that movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
and as a matter of fact, I almost left the movie after about 90 seconds.
Anybody else? Can you tell me, when you hear human trafficking, what comes to mind?
I used to be a coordinator at a homeless shelter, so quite often I would see pimps with their women, and you try and talk to the ladies and they're scared to death to walk out that door alone, no matter how much you talk. Because
That's-
you're not with them, later on in the day.
Yeah. That's a very good point, and we're gonna hopefully talk about that later. So a lot of myths, there are a lot of myths about human trafficking, and some of them are on the board. Human trafficking is always or usually a violent crime. Anybody believes that? Always or usually a violent crime. Okay, not always, not usually. Human trafficking most times begin with a love affair, whether it's familial love or it's friendship or boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. It always begins, usually always, most times begins with love. Love. Traffickers target victims they do not know. Anybody believe that? Traffickers target victims they do not know. So it's the stranger danger. The young person or the child or the woman is walking on the road and a white van pulls up and just somebody jumps out and grabs her and nobody knows who they are. Is that what trafficking is? Okay.
Not usually.
Well, it could be.
It could be, but it's a very small number of trafficking actually happens like that. Very often, the trafficker and the victim know each other very well. The other myth is that women and girls can be are only women and girls can be victims of sex trafficking. No. That's correct. That's a myth. Because there are a lot of men um, who are, and we're going to talk a little bit about men being trafficked and why they are not as represented as women and girls. Human trafficking involves moving, traveling, or transporting a person across state or national borders. Is that a myth? Is that it happens, but a lot of times human trafficking happens right at home, right there. The victim is not moved across state. The victim is not moved out of their home sometimes. People being trafficked are physically unable to leave their situation or are locked in or are held against their will. That's a common myth? Anybody believe that? Yeah, but usually they are able to leave. Usually they are not locked in. Usually they are not held against their will because they're physically free to go, but emotionally and mentally they are in prison. Trafficking, according to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, is the recruitment, harboring, transporting, provision, and or obtaining of a person for a commercial sex act in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. Commercial sex act means any sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. So, for instance, a 15-year-old boy exchanges sex for a rideshare driver for free rides. That is trafficking automatically. If the boy is over 18, or let's say he's 19 years old, and he exchanges the same favor for rideshare with a rideshare driver, free rides for sex, that is only can be considered trafficking if there is evidence of force, fraud, or coercion. What is force? Force is the use of threats to get someone to do something against their will. So it's usually threats of violence against their person, threats of violence against their families, threats of exposing some secrets or something that the individual may consider shameful. Fraud is promising, for example, promising bringing an individual from, let's say, from New York to Connecticut with the promise of a job. And that person comes to New York, well, let's say a job in a beauty salon. And this individual comes to Connecticut and all her documents are confiscated. All her money is confiscated. And let's say the person who brought her spent $1,500 to relocate her. The person may tell her, okay, you owe me 15,000, so you have to work. Um, so it's a totally different thing. And the work is, of course, a commercial sex act, or it could be force. Sorry, coercion. Coercion is usually most times in that love affair relationship where the individual is called what they call grooming, is groomed. So most times it is an individual who has a problem, who has a need, who is vulnerable, has a vulnerability. And this individual will connect to that vulnerability and use it to his or her advantage in order to extort that individual. So for an adult, there must be proof of force, fraud, or coercion by a third party. And it's important, that phrase by a third party is important because that's a fine line between a commercial sex act and what we call survival sex. Because what we consider survival sex is an individual who feels desperate and this is the only thing I can do. This is the only thing I know. And what happens with a lot of survivors of human trafficking, because they have been trafficked, especially those who've been trafficked since childhood and has never known another life or another source of livelihood, if they fall in the cracks, if they fall out of a program, or if they do not follow through a program that can guide them and support them into that state of independence and making positive decisions and choices, and most of them go right back to survival sex. They either go back to their trafficker or they go into survival sex. That is where they have control over that aspect of their life. But if there's a third party that uses either force, fraud, or coercion, then that is human trafficking. And then there's labor trafficking, which is also a growing concern, but there's not much data and information that backs labor trafficking, especially in the state of Connecticut. And but it still exists. And most times, labor trafficking, there's an intersectionality between labor trafficking and sex trafficking, because of course they're working for someone. So there's that intersectionality. So there's much more studies and much more data analysis that is being done to bring more information to light about labor trafficking, especially across the country and specifically in Connecticut. So labor trafficking is, of course, the recruitment, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. And with labor trafficking, there's no distinction between child or adult. The same burden of proof is on that individual to prove force, fraud, or coercion by a third party. And I just want to make this point about human trafficking, that any person can be a victim of human trafficking. Any person. And by that I mean human trafficking is no respecter of age, of ethnicity, of religious affiliation, of sexual orientation, of gender. Any person. The youngest child that has been trafficked in Connecticut to date that we know about is a 2-year-old.
Oh my God.
Is a 2-year-old who was brought to DCF, who was trafficked by his father, who is a doctor, a medical doctor. He trafficked his 2-year-old to his friends. And we've encountered individuals in their 50s, in their 60s, 50s in the underground program. But we have also, encountered with other agencies that we partner with, individuals that they work with who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, who have been trafficked or are currently being trafficked. So there is no age limit. There is no gender limit. There is no, anyone can be a victim of human trafficking. So this is where we're going to pause a little and breathe, reset. And in a few minutes, Lori will be talking about what child trafficking looks like in Connecticut. It's funny. We deal with adult traffickers, as Lori explained earlier, and that in itself is horrific. But for some reason, when we hear about child trafficking, it does engender this, much more compassion. But I want you to understand that whatever we share about child trafficking here in Connecticut, the same thing applies to an adult trafficker victims. And most of our clients, the 22 clients that we serve right now, and even those who have passed through, most of them were trafficked as children. And that's where we come in. When they age out of the child care system, then they're referred to the underground unit. But Laura will talk a little bit more about child trafficking.
I just wanted to ask first if anybody had any questions so far, if there was anything that you wanted to share or
Yeah.
anything that
Right.
you wanted to ask.
So I have a question. So, I've heard at least that Danbury is supposed to be a hotbed for human trafficking. And I always figured it was because they're bringing people in from out of state and stuff. What's the underlying like conditions or factors? I mean, why is Danbury why is it a hotbed?
Well, I think part of that is because it's proximity. I think there were 2 girls from New York City that were just found, right, in Danbury. And I think it is not exclusively, human trafficking happens in every single town in Connecticut. There's been at least one case. But there are pockets where it's more prevalent, and it has to do with transportation oftentimes. It's we're smack in between New York City and Boston, where so there's the 94 corridor, there's the 84 corridor. So when there's larger populations in those towns. So we do see more of it there, but it's not exclusive to that. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if I'm answering your question
Yeah, no.
completely, but. And I do think the fact that, there are statistics too, we'll be getting into as far as who is more at risk. There are people of color are at more risk, people who are LGBTQ plus are at more risk, and we'll learn more about that. So again, if they're runaways or if they're going to be more central to an urban setting. And I know Danbury's not, New York City, but still it's close enough.
Yeah, it's within that corridor. And I think too, a few years ago, the focus was on Newington, Berlin Turnpike. So I think a part of why Danbury is so much in the focus right now is because research is more focused in this area. Fairfield County, right? So there's research being focused here, and so there's much more exposure, which is I hope it happens in every county, in every town in Connecticut, that we actually uncover and expose these situations, and it really does help the fight against human trafficking.
What is your age range for definition of child trafficking?
18 years
on children. We have the national hotline that refers to organizations when, if there's a call that comes in from Connecticut. There's the task force, and that's the state human task force on, task force on human trafficking. So they are all keeping statistics, but we still believe it's grossly underrepresented.
So how often did the police become involved?
We get referred.
Task force may get a call that, they're probable trafficking happening. They contact local law enforcement. If there is cause for probing, then they will contact one of us and a human trafficking agency. They'll conduct, their investigations. They will do their assessments, and that's really. But I must say though that a lot of trafficking, a lot of victims that go through the law enforcement system, you get arrested. A lot of it is not identified. A lot of traffickers or traffic victims are not identified as such. And so when we get a client, they have court cases because they were arrested and charged while being trafficked or while doing something illegal, criminal activity for their trafficker, but it was never identified as such.
So in other words, it doesn't matter who is, then you guys are out of the picture, right? The person regardless of age or whatever can say, I want to do this. This is what I know how to do. I want to do it. This is how I make my money.
There's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
It's
to the person.
it's a voluntary program. You volunteer to be a part of our program, but we have mentors that will not allow you to do that. I don't that individual to do that. No. What we try everything we can. And we have great success rate. All the clients that come to us, we like to say 80 or 90%, but in reality, I don't think we have a client that we know of that remains in our program or remain within Connecticut that has either gone back to their trafficker or gone back to the life. The ones who leave or request to be sent out of state, after a while, we're not sure what happened. But those who remain in our program.
When you say in the name of your program, what are you doing to keep?
We're going to be talking a little bit more about our program, what we do, but we do mentoring, case management, social work, but we'll talk much more about that later.
And could just address, I just wanted to finish saying something too, is one of the problems with, for victims of human trafficking is it's almost like being brainwashed. So they don't understand they don't understand what's happening. And oftentimes we'll do a presentation like this and we'll have people come up to us and say, I was trafficked. I had no idea. And so our mentors work really hard with them to help them flip that narrative that what was happening to them was normal and it's been normalized for them. So we do have to sometimes work a little harder. They might say, I want to do this, but they don't understand. So we try to work with them to help them change that narrative.
So the ones who are working with these children or these people have totally convinced that person is worthless and this is all they can do to survive.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're brain, they are
totally brainwashed.
We have in Connecticut, we have also, we had someone come here many years ago, who first introduced me to Connecticut traffic. Before that, I always thought that it was like big things where they brought a lot of Asian women over into the, do we have any of that going on here that you know of? And do those people ever break out or? I
There-
mean, find you and get help and.
There's an organization called CIRI. I really don't know what it stands for, what it's CIRI. I don't know what the acronym stands for,
Yes, it's has
but
to do with immigrants.
but it has to do with immigrants. And they work specifically with immigrants who have been trafficked. So they have all that information, all that data. Yeah.
They're very well versed in the immigration system, so they, and the legalities and all that of it, so.
You're basically more one-on-one.
Well, we are, and it just happens that, all of our, clients at this point have been trafficked in the United States. They were born in the United
Yeah.
States and have been trafficked here. A lot of them that come from other countries, for work or labor, they do a lot with labor trafficking too.
Yeah.
So they're experts in that field, so we refer to them if that's the case.
We provide protection for homeless
Protection from
from
the trafficker.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Let me talk a little bit more about that later, about our program. Sorry.
Are your victims, are they verified government agencies or law enforcement, or do you have like a direct hotline?
I mean, when you first reach out to them.
Well, we don't reach out. They reach out to us. So the hospital may refer an individual, invite us to come in for assessment. So we assess that individual. Law enforcement, the police department from anywhere in the state, sometimes the FBI will contact us through the regional human trafficking task force. And another agency, let's say a pregnancy or a mental health or a recovery program, whatever the agency may have an individual who they suspect is trafficked, has been trafficked, and they reach out to us. So that's how we get our referrals.
We're not a rescue organization, so we
These
don't,
people are already in some kind of facility.
they're either in the facility or identified
All right, right.
by somebody, within the
So you're
FBI, et
not going
cetera.
up the streets saying, I'm hearing that you.
We
No,
And we've had several individuals who've come straight from their traffickers.
Yeah.
I think one of the most empowering stories I've heard, was sometime last year, mid last year, there was a woman who was referred to the organization and there were mentors made contact with her, but she was still with her trafficker. And she determined that on a specific holiday, I'm not sure which holiday it was, she knew that he was, but he didn't go. So she knocked him out. And then
Wow.
she knocked him out. And yeah,
Very brave.
so yeah.
Are the traffickers, is it mostly like individuals or in my head, I imagine they're highly organized, like an organization of traffickers, or I assume they're highly organized?
It's both. They're gangs, they're That's very heartbreaking for me. Okay, final question, and then we move on. Yes, sir.
And so how many clients do you see within a year?
We have 22 clients right now in our program, but we can serve up to 50, between 50 to 60 individuals, which, in a year, which, right. So not all of the people we serve are in our program. So we offer direct service, indirect service. But we have 22 individuals now who are receiving direct services. I will talk a little bit more about, what that service looks like.
Just to let you know that that number has over doubled since January that we're serving now. So we're getting more and more referrals. Yeah,
Yes,
we're getting more and more referrals, and we have a wait
and the
list.
wait list that grows.
Do you have a guess on actual
Numbers that
Like 24.
what percentage you're serving that are actually, like, do you think the number in Connecticut is over 1,000? I mean, is there any way to make a guesstimate?
Really hard based on the data that we have. It is really hard. The last hotline data said
we've got a slide. We've got a
Yeah, we've
slide
got a
that we're going to
slide.
show you.
Yeah.
So it's
roughly 300, but that's just the calls that were
it's so underreported.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's so underreported.
yeah.
And and you asked a question about the 24
Well, I like in the calendar year 24, how many people do your organization?
last year. Well, so last year's a little different. Last year we've been in existence. Our program's been in existence for 3 years. We've done awareness longer, since 2012, but our program itself. And so we started the program, and then we realized that we needed to do some tweaking. So in November of 23, we paused the program, we revamped it, we hired new staff, and we relaunched it in May of 24. And so we served, in the program, there were like 17 at one point last year. And then the numbers, and people either graduate, some of them will go to other states. They decide they'd like to go to another state. So there was some people that dropped out or left the program for those types of reasons. And then we had 10 going into January, and then that quickly grew to 22 to 24 right now. So
Do you know why it also increased like that?
and the good results that we're having. So we've been working very intentional about reaching out and doing outreach to law enforcement and the FBI and other organizations that may, right, the hospitals. We've done trainings for a lot of these people, pregnancy counseling centers, mental health organizations. We're doing training for them so that they can more easily recognize the potential that this person had been trafficked. So.
How about on this sensational news and enrollment? Yeah, it serves its purpose. I think it brings the whole topic of human trafficking to, out in the open and on everybody's screen. So the next time an organization like ours talk about human trafficking and its prevalence, people will listen. So I think it serves its purpose.
All right, so what does child trafficking look like? I'm going to sit too, if that's okay. So there's all different types of child sex trafficking. You can read them. I just want to highlight a few of them. Internet-based is one of the fastest growing ways that traffickers are reaching our children, which stands to reason, especially since 2020 when COVID came about and all the children were sent home with laptops and perhaps not a lot of safeguards in place to protect them. So, and it's just been, because this is an area that's just consistently growing. So you can see the escort services, casinos. I can tell you stories about casinos, but we don't have the time for that. That is a place where young women in particular are targeted. We're seeing an uptick in peer-to-peer trafficking where they'll go to a party and the boyfriend will say to the girlfriend or vice versa, hey, Joe's going to give me some pot, but you got to do this to him and in exchange. So we're seeing an uptick in those types of cases.
Can I talk a little bit more about another aspect of peer-to-peer?
Yes.
What details I've seen a lot with kids, peer-to-peer trafficking is, uh, for example, there are two friends. And so if a friend goes to another friend and say, I don't know what I'm going to do because we got eviction notice and my mom, her job is not able to cover the rent and we're going to be out of our home. And her friend, who is being herself trafficked, will say, I know how you can make some quick money, or I know how you can help your mom. And they've been hearing a lot of those in more recently.
Absolutely. One of the more prevalent ways in Connecticut is interfamilial. So it will be somebody that the person, a family member, an aunt, an uncle, a father, a mother, a friend, neighbor. That is quite prevalent in Connecticut. Then there's the survival sex, which we talked about, sex for drugs, and the other ones that you all often hear about, marriage, trafficking, labor. One of the things that, again, that we're seeing, that law enforcement in particular is seeing an uptick in, is something called sextortion. And we were just invited last year down to New London because the schools in New London are seeing a significant increase of this type of trafficking taking place. And so that's just, they're threatening to expose sexual images in order to make a person do something. And so it starts online. They're very good at what they do. They're groomers. They will be on social media. They might get into somebody might say, get a friend request. They don't know them, but they're like, oh yeah, I'll accept that. And then they can infiltrate all their friends and it just goes on. And what they'll look for is somebody coming home from school saying, my parents stink. I've had a hard day. Life is worthless. They're very good at detecting vulnerabilities. And then they will start by portraying themselves as somebody that's their age. They will portray themselves as a friend. And from there, the problems begin. And we're going to see a little video on this. This is a hard video to watch.
Can I share some stats on that?
Oh, yes, please.
On sextortion, because it's really a growing pandemic. Online trafficking jumped from since 2020 by 98%. 25% of victims were 13 years or younger when threatened. So they go after the most vulnerable. 2/3 of the victims were girls who were threatened before age 16. 98% of sextortion offenders do not know the victim. Online victims are often targeted on apps they frequent. Victims report that their first contact with the perpetrator came as a social media friend request. And we always talk with our parents and our caregivers to be much more vigilant with how our children use the internet. 60% of online victims were threatened within 2 weeks of initial contact. They don't waste time and they don't play. The FBI has reported an uptick in suicide connected directly to sextortion. A sextortioner, or is the perpetrator will often bombard the victim with texts. I don't send me the money. And within a few seconds, I don't see the money. Another few seconds, where's the money? I'm going to tell your friends. Does your mother know? And it's that constant bombardment that often drives them to do, just that wrecks their life and sometimes take their own life. Most men don't speak. Most boys, and also that FBI report shows that most of those victims who committed suicide were boys, because most men don't speak due to the shame. None of them will speak. All of them will not speak because of the shame. But boys, especially, because of the shame, because of the embarrassment, because of the threats. And a lot of times it does not make it to law enforcement. And even when there have been cases that have been discovered way after, because even the family would be ashamed to say, this is what my child went through. And this is what drove my child to commit suicide. So sextortion is also a very underreported form of trafficking. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a note, 3 nights ago, the CBS Evening News ran a segment on this specifically. And in both cases that they showed, they were young teenagers, boys, who were put through this ringer, and both of them had committed suicide.
Yeah. And the FBI is focusing a lot on boys because they're so underreported. Girls, it's easier for girls to talk. Can I just share this quickly? I have two god babies in Georgia. One is 9, one is 11. My 9-year-old, when I went to visit her a few months ago, said, "Oh, Auntie, I used to have a boyfriend." And I'm like, "Oh, what? Oh, no, I'm done with that." Okay. And she said, so I said, "Oh, so what happened?" "Well, he asked me for a picture." I said, "Okay." I said, "What kind of picture?" "He wanted a picture of my feet." She said, "Of my feet." So I said, "Why would you want a picture of my feet?" "Well, if you love me, if I'm your boyfriend, you will send me a picture of my feet." She said, "I just said, bye." And that was it. I was so happy. Because, and then she tells me of a girl in her school who is now an 8th grader. When she was in 5th grade, she sent pictures. She sent, pictures, vulnerable pictures to a boy. And this boy made photocopies of that picture and lined the hallway. The boy was removed from the school by his parents. That girl is still in that school. Why? I don't know. But she still bears that name that the kids call her from that incident. All the way, she's now in 8th grade. She should be in high school this year. No, she's still in middle school, right? 8th grade. She still bears that name. Kids still call her that. She's still isolated. She's still bearing the shame every day she goes to school. So it's really a horrible situation. And that's another thing we always share when we share with adults. Talk to the kids in your care. Be careful what you put up on social media. Be careful what you share, not even to the don't even not even as siblings. There are certain things you don't share online because even though the FBI and there are a lot of websites that DCF and the FBI and Homeland Security and all those agencies have created where parents can go on and scrub pictures, but it doesn't really get scrubbed. Somebody somewhere, some brilliant mind can retract that picture. So it's best not to send at all.
Yeah, that's something we always have to reiterate, and you can reiterate it once. I mean, my daughter, she's an adult now, but when she was growing up, we had these conversations all the time. And then I got a call one night from her youth minister, and he said, "Have you seen your daughter's Facebook page?" And this was when Facebook was fairly new. I said, "No." He said, "You might want to check it out." And there was a picture of her and her friend at the beach. They were in their bikinis, but they were showering, and they thought that was like a really fun picture to post online. And they were getting all these little comments, and and so I guess my point is as many times as I told her, she still didn't make that connection that this was inappropriate at 14 years old. So it's just an ongoing conversation that we need to be having with our kids and our grandkids. So before we show the video, I just want to have you pay attention to some of the little details, and we'll talk about it afterwards. I just want you to keep in mind what you're seeing and what strikes you, what sticks out to you.
Here's another video from our special guy. We haven't talked all day. I wish you went to my school or closer so we could finally meet. Thank you. And I'm an hour. I'll go sit him too long on the phone. I know you've been waiting for this for a while. I wanted to give you something special. It's okay. Who are you? Why are you doing this?
No matter how many times I see that, it still makes me feel sick inside. But I'll ask you, what struck you about the video? Is there anything that you took note of that you'd like to share?
Mother was.
Yeah. Yeah. Did everybody hear that?
No.
The mom just wasn't really involved. She was kind of standoffish on the outskirts, not really engaged at all. Anything else?
Made her feel really special.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That's what they do. Anyone else?
I was just a normal everyday child.
It was just a normal, everyday child in a home where parents were. Yeah,
People are so busy nowadays, parents.
that's true.
Most of them are working and they don't have any, they really don't have time for the kids.
There's a lot of, the kids do tend to have a little bit more time and they have access to the world, right? Right in their phones or their computers. The whole world is there for them. Anybody else?
And the picture was different than the actual, the observed. The picture was.
Oh, right. It
It
looked like a peer, right? One of her friends, a cute boyfriend, but it was actually not what he seemed. Anything else? Yeah.
The girl in the beginning was very happy and bubbly, and the attitude was very impressed and scared.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyone else have any thoughts?
How quickly it got sucked in.
Yes. If you notice the date stamps on it, it was very quick. It's very quick. Did anybody notice how many folders he had?
Yes, I did notice.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's really what sextortion looks like, and the very accurate portrayal of what's happening to our kids.
Do you ever get to show this in schools?
Not in schools.
Youth groups.
We've been to a couple youth groups in churches. Yeah.
That's really excellent right
That's
there.
very well.
That's, that if you somebody could get to them before they get invited and explain stuff about what they're gonna encounter and what they should do about it, stuff like that, if they could be prepared rather than have these whatevers.
It does take education and it takes the vigilance on the part of the parents. It just, and the parents need to be educated too, because a lot of them don't understand. A lot of times these things can come through gaming. I don't understand it all because I don't game and I don't have any kids that game, but it can come through those gaming apps and things like that. So a parent might think it's totally innocent, but clearly they don't understand the complexities of it. And what
Nobody's getting at these kids. Nobody's explaining things.
No, I just figured that.
You do?
Yeah. We brought police into the high school a number of years ago and explained about what they put on the internet stays. No, it doesn't look like it all. We try to say, this goes forever, it never disappears.
Yeah,
But until we can just can't leave it.
yeah,
Yeah, well, the minds, right, the young mind isn't formed, you know, the way an adult mind is, and so it's constant reinforcement that needs to take place. Did you have a question?
I'm using peer pressure. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, amount of it. So, again, I find it hard, like, if someone has, they can be influenced sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean you look at me? Find all the stuff about why I said I wanted to kill myself. Why I said I wanted to kill this person. And they don't, because it was like you said, so they don't have maturity to turn on you know.
Right.
There's no education.
I
Nobody gets to them. Who gets to them? They get to
I
them. not
think
them.
they can see this, some
Other.
educated people.
They do,
They see this.
Talk about it over and over, but just up here,
yeah.
you know.
They do. DCF has an excellent
Train.
training for youths, and also caregivers, teachers and counselors and so there is some level of education. It's
Does not work.
it's
Never did.
it
It's the,
Is it a-
this can't happen to me attitude. It's
and it's
this can't
right.
happen.
It
Oh
is
my
so
God,
no matter
never
how
did
much
that.
you inform them, and I think you know if we were to pick these like you know semantics, they're informed, but they're not educated.
We had a situation where we explained to them, you know, how it lasts forever, and, you know, you go for a job. And they can pull in people that have a job and pull it off, and what you've done, they can see it, and they okay, who's ever got a job.
Yeah.
It's a matter of a continual conversation, and that's why having the adults in their life, in these children's lives is so crucial. Because it is a like I shared with you before, my daughter heard it all the time. And did she do something inappropriate? She did. You know, you just have to constantly be vigilant and communicate. But we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So there's been an alarming increase, which we sort of talked about, 2020 to 98% increase in online attempts by sex traffickers to recruit children. And you can see the number of referrals that have gone up from the DCF numbers in Connecticut. And again, we know these are the cases that are reported. So we know that those numbers are
Tip of the
underrepresented.
iceberg.
Yeah, correct. And this is just a breakdown by area. So you'll see. That's how you, I don't know what that is. So Bridgeport, Milford, unidentified. I think that's what that is.
Okay.
Unidentified have all had cases. This is as of 2023. It'd be interesting to see when the new statistics come out if Danbury, you know, is on that list as an uptick. I wouldn't be surprised. And New London.
Yeah.
The placement at time of victimization, I just want to point out to you, as we talked before, 67% of those victimized are living at home. They're in a home. We often think of, you know, the street or runaways or group homes or DCF, you know, placement, and that does happen, but primarily it's happening in their own homes.
TFC.
Popular child.
I'm sorry.
CFC. is
Oh,
what?
DCF?
TFC.
TFC 6%.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the answer to that.
The great part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I'm sure we knew it.
Yeah.
Some kind of foster care. That's it. Thank you. Foster care. Yes, I knew we knew it.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Foster care, DCF. It's right beside DCF, we should have known. So foster care, DCF, foster care, group home,
Hospital. and others unknown. But again, the big takeaway from the screen is that it's happening in their own homes primarily.
Right.
And relative is the second biggest.
Yeah. Yes.
There was an article in the Richfield
Sharing that. It is very unnerving when you have all these things coming into play. It's a hard enough battle as it is, but they always find ways to, get around things and to make their operations more efficient, so to speak. And it is very scary. So let's talk a little bit about red flags that you might see in a child. Truancy. If you're if you don't know where they are, if they're missing for periods of time, if they're not going to school, and you can't really identify why that might be, that could be a red flag. Frequently missing from care. Again, if they go out and then you don't know where they're going, you come home from work and they're not there, those could be all signs of, could be other things, but definitely you need to think about traffic. Right, yeah. If you see that they're coming home with new clothing that you can't afford or that they can't afford, electronics, items of value, when the grooming process begins, that's often a way that the perpetrators will endear themselves to the victims. Inconsistent or scripted communication. They tell you the same story, they tell you different stories. Just if you're sensing in your spirit that what they're telling you doesn't ring true, that definitely be a sign that there's something that needs to be investigated. If they become tense, fearful, aggressive, oppositional, defensive, any of those adjectives could describe somebody who is being trafficked, a young one that's being trafficked. If they have started to drink or you think there's drugs, definitely could be a sign. And tattoos and branding, if they have a mark on their skin or you see something that, wasn't there before, oftentimes the traffickers will put their mark or have them tattooed or branded with their mark so that they know that they're theirs. It could be, sometimes it's a barcode, Sometimes it's a
QR
gang
code.
symbol or QR code, yeah. So, that warrants further conversation and investigation. Damage to the victim. We can read these, but it just when you work with people that have been trafficked, it's just so hard to even put into words the damage that's done. Substance abuse problems or addictions, psychological trauma from daily abuse, medical problems, bruises, scars, branding, sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancies, dental problems, infertility, and so much more. And oftentimes it's many of these all together. So we want to be the light here. We want to lighten it up just a little bit and talk about things that you can do to help prevent. So again, get your kids and grandchildren, make sure they're involved in proactive social activities and supports, positive connections, youth groups, sport, guidance counselors, family members, continued education for youth on sex trafficking in ways of being lured into the life. And this is what goes back to what we were just talking about. It can't be a one-off conversation. It has to be ongoing. Internet and social media safety. This is where my coworker Amy always says, I wouldn't let them have anything till they were 16 years old. And we know that's really hard in today's society, but the longer you can delay your kids having a phone and unlimited access to these things, the better you are. Youth employment opportunities once they're 16. An educated community regarding the prevalence of sex trafficking and red flags. So one of the things that I just wanted to mention before it crossed my mind, we do these events and we offer them, we'll speak just about anywhere that we're offered. And we were invited to speak in London. We were invited to speak in Simsbury, specifically on this topic. And we had 9 people show up to one of those presentations and 15 show up to the other one. So it could have been, there's a lot of reasons why people may not have shown up. But quite frankly, what we oftentimes find, especially in the suburban areas, it's not happening here. And there's this barrier for us to get our message across because people just don't think that it could happen to their child and that it's happening in their communities. So that's one of our obstacles that we face oftentimes. So the church has been a really good door for us to reach people. But when you're working with communities and stuff, it's not often well received.
And let me just wrap up this child trafficking section with a success story. T, I'll call her T, is the survivor mind behind the adult mental program, the underground. She met the founder during an awareness event at the church, and she said, what are you doing for people who have left the life and just are lost or want to leave the life and, can't find their way out? And so they sat with the founder and a few others. She sat with the founder, a few others, and they came up with the adult mentor program. Her life is one of, intense pain, but is now one of intense pride when you think about it. She was trafficked since she could remember. She was born to be trafficked, if that sounds that way. Her mother called her my commodity, my investment. There are 3 siblings. One was sold to a couple. The other 2, herself and her brother, were sold daily to men and women for years. When we met T, she was in her 40s, their 50s. She was 50 years old. She was in her 40s. And she, at that time, began to receive services, began to receive counseling and mentoring, case management. She was able to study for her GED. She's never been to school. Preparing for her GED was the first time that she actually did any kind of formal school. She learned to read while she was in prison. And now she is a great influence on the life of people who have been through domestic violence, people who've been trafficked, people who've had substance abuse problem. She's a great counselor and a very, very strong individual who loves God so much and talks about her faith and her, you know, her how God rescued her life. She tells her testimony everywhere she goes. Um, and she's so I mean, we share a lot. We shared a lot. But I just want to share that story to let us know that it's not hopeless. If we can save one individual, but look at it. God has allowed us to have 22 individuals right now in our program. And we pray for those individuals every day. And we invite our church partners to join us in prayer every day. We have a monthly prayer meeting where we pray for these survivors because our goal is for them to be independent and empowered and contributing productive citizens and individuals to their society, like Miss T is. What parents?
Her parents.
Her parents. I don't know. I never asked her about her parents. But it was just her mother. Yeah, I don't know. Right. She never mentioned her father, but I don't know where the mother is at. Life just went on. But she's over 50 now, so I mean, yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about what we do. Adult human trafficking. Sure.
Before we move on to that, and I think I know the answer to this, probably a resounding no. But I keep thinking, I think about that guy in the video, probably sells those folders, you know, with all these issues. Does anything exist on the face of the earth that can possibly
um, the demand side that try to, um, you know, I, most of the buyers are, males, white males, making over 100,000 a year. And so if some of these, ministries, so to speak, will try to work with men to prevent them from going down the porn route, to going, you know, to having it lead to demand. There's also an organization that how do you say that when they're on the computer and they're searching for people that are looking to buy, and they try to stop it before it gets to that point, before they can get to the actual victim or whatever. You know, the police officers do stings and things like that, but as long as there's a demand, it's a $230 billion industry. It's, you know, that's what's driving it is money.
Maybe we should sing AI on them.
Yeah.
Use AI again.
To the positive, right?
Yes. All right. So I'm just going to run through some statistics about adult survivors in Connecticut, and also this will also highlight the vulnerability of adults to being trafficked. 43% of adult survivors make less than 25,000 compared to the general population. So that means that the general population is making 50,000. An adult survivor, someone who is vulnerable to trafficking, is making 25,000. 2% of survivors trafficked as adults were not treated with dignity and respect as a child.
That's 92%.
Oh, sorry. 92%. Thanks, Lori. I was thinking about that. That's why I paused. 92% of survivors trafficked as adults were not treated with dignity and respect as a child. And we alluded to that earlier, that a lot of trafficked victims have been experiencing trafficking or some kind of abuse since they were children. 91% of survivors trafficked as adults struggle with some form of mental illness. 100% of the underground's clients have some kind of mental illness to varying degrees. Children who are exploited are vulnerable to repeat exploitation in a different form of trafficking as they grow older. 66% of adults had no child protective service involvement as children. 20% of those who have been trafficked as adults or who have been identified as victims as adults should have been investigated as children. The DCF does a lot of work. Child Protective Services do a lot of work. A lot of these government children organizations, they do a lot of work, but they can't do everything. And a lot of kids do get fall through the cracks.
And I saw a show, I don't have a TV anymore, when I used to have a TV. There was a show about the DCF was on this particular situation, on this case. They knew something was going on there, but they were told in so many words to get out of there, that was not their business to get out. So what was going on continued. They can go just so far. But the people who are involved in this, they can stop it in any minute. And then after the thing happens, then they go back and say, where were you? Why weren't you paying attention to what was happening here? We have a very weird world now where the people who are doing stuff can put in trouble the ones who are trying to point out the fact that this is going on.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of some of the reasons, or part of the reasons why legislation was passed to differentiate between child trafficking and adult trafficking, whereas there's no burden of proof on the victim for force, fraud, or coercion for a child, as long as there's some kind of some kind of abuse, and there is a claim of trafficking, then, well, first of all, any kind of abuse of a child, it is taken seriously, it is investigated now. If there's a call of trafficking or an illusion of trafficking, then that is further investigated. It again, like I said, it may fall through the cracks. I mean, if information is being withheld, you know, if there's some people who can talk their way out of anything, you know. So, like I said, not everybody who should have been investigated or anybody who should have been recognized as being trafficked as a child will, you know, it will show up, or DCF will really see that, or Child Protective Services will see that, will identify that at that time. But the good thing is, as adults, they now have more opportunity to say, hey, this is what has been happening to me, this is what is happening to me, I need help. And hopefully they'll get the help they need. Red flags in adults. Adults who demonstrate mental health concerns, have a conversation with them. An adult who has a debt that can never be paid off. I spoke earlier about fraud. You spent $1,500 to help someone, but you're asking for $15,000 in return. And the horrible thing about traffickers is that debt continues to grow. So yeah, you paid $10,000, but I was feeding you. I bought you clothes. I drove you here and to your appointment. So you've added another 10,000. So now you owe me 20. You know, so if there's a debt that they cannot pay off, have a conversation. What's going on? If they're working, but they never have money, or they mention that they have to give their money to someone else, their earnings are being confiscated, have that conversation. If they're unable to leave their place of work, if they're not free to go anywhere, if they have to be asking permission as adults, even as children. I always say when I speak to youth groups, if you have a friend as a child, I speak to youth, if your friend has to ask permission from a friend and not a parent or a caregiver, have a conversation. And I say to adults, if your friend has to ask permission from a a living partner or a husband or a friend or someone, they identify as friend. Have the conversation. Why are you asking permission, first of all, as an adult, permission to go somewhere? Secondly, why are you asking this particular individual and not that particular individual? Have that conversation. You're not able to leave. You're not free to go. Have that conversation. If that person is always traveling and you don't know them to have a traveling job, have that conversation. Moving from town to city, from the state, and coming back, find out what's happening. If that individual feels that any help or necessities they need must be paid for by sex, or if they feel that the only thing they can ever do in this life is to provide commercial sex, have a conversation. At some point, that person is either being trafficked or may have been trafficked. A homeless person is most vulnerable to being trafficked. And an individual who is addicted to a substance is most vulnerable to being trafficked. So if you see these happening to an adult, have a conversation. That person may be trafficked. We've encountered a lot of situations where we talk to an adult and they say, "Oh no, I wasn't trafficked. I was just helping my boyfriend. We were just. This is how I was providing for the home." And after conversations with our mentor, they realized, oh, I was being trafficked because I may have worked $2,000, but I only got like $20 to buy food for the house because he took everything. But in her mind, while in that situation, she was just helping her boyfriend take care of the house. So it's good to have those conversations when you see those red flags. What makes it so difficult for adults to exit the life? Criminal records related to their exploitation. A lot of victims are made to commit crime by their traffickers. They are helpless to in the situation. They have to do it. A lot of times they are caught and they will never, ever tell on their trafficker because that control, they are so trapped in their minds. In their minds, if they call that name, they will fall down and die. Yeah. Or their parents, their family members could be wiped out. Or because there's a lot of things that they hold that they hold over them. And so they will serve the time, they will go to court, they will go to prison, but they will never talk about their trafficker and why they actually committed that crime. And so they have these records. Great thing about Connecticut is there's a group of legislation, group of agencies and legal workers in human trafficking who is working to have, first of all, to give traffickers a better time in court, as a way of speaking, um, and two, to have records expunged once an individual is confirmed as a survivor of human trafficking. So those are on the tables, and we're praying about that, and we're pushing that. We're reaching out to legislators. We're reaching out to politicians, um, to lend our voices to let them know that yes, this needs to be done for these individuals. An individual who is deep in debt, a lot of times there's financial abuse. A lot of traffickers will take out credit cards in their victim's name, will take out utilities in their victim, buy cars in their victims' names, and they have these debts in their names that they have nothing to do with. Um, Access to housing. If I leave my trafficker, where do I live? I'm going to be homeless. And that is a big, big thing. Housing in, especially in the state of Connecticut, is not the most accessible. And that's something we're going to be talking about. Access to mental and physical health services. We know what the health system is like. Difficulty finding a job, holding a job. Of course, if you have a record, of course, you've never worked before. You know, there's a lot of things that will create that. Lack of education. A lot of them never been to school if they're being trafficked as children. Lack of safe, trusted, or healthy community. You know, the stigma and the shame. And of course, there's the whole manipulation and control of the trafficker. So who do you think the traffickers and buyers are? And I'm just going to go through this and then I'll take a few more questions. The trafficker is anyone who benefits from or facilitates the commercial sexual exploitation of another is a trafficker. So a trafficker could be someone who just sells an individual, brings an individual to someone and say, okay, here's a girl, I got her for you. Or here's a boy, I got him for you. And he gets a one-off pay and he goes to the next to get the next victim. Or a trafficker could be someone who has a group of people that he is sending out for commercial sex and collecting at the end of every operation. Boyfriend or girlfriends are traffickers. Peers, friends are traffickers. Family members are traffickers. Anyone in a controlled position, a position of control. Police officers have been identified as traffickers. Teachers, clergy, coaches, doctors, parents, men and women of varying ages, any ethnicity, any race. And traffickers, while it's an organized crime, a trafficker is not always a part of an organization. These pictures are individuals of are pictures of traffickers in Connecticut, actual traffickers who were caught and put through the system, caught and prosecuted. What do you notice about the traffickers? Young men, women,
Many
different ethnicities. And this gentleman used to be up over there, used to be our board chair's neighbor in Danbury. He used to live like 2 houses down from our board chair. And he didn't know until we were presenting one evening and he saw the picture and said, hold on, I know that man. He's my neighbor. He used to be my neighbor, of course. He was prosecuted, probably serving jail time. He's there in Danbury. So he's from Danbury. So it's no surprise that Danbury is really coming to the focus. Trafficking in Danbury is coming to the focus right now. And let's look at the buyer. The buyer is anyone who exchanges something of value for commercial sex. Both men and women are buyers. All races are buyers. 20.6% of men purchase sex at least once in their lifetime. Only 6 of them report being arrested for buying sex. That's a very tiny percentage compared to the number of victims who get arrested for supposedly selling sex.
How do they arrive at that 20.6%? A good question.
I guess it's just numbers divided by numbers.
And does that mean physical sex or pornography or?
No, that is physical. Physical.
Well, I guess I'm really naive because I find that really hard.
You think that's a small number?
No, this is a big number.
You think? Oh, okay.
20%. I mean,
21%?
with everybody giving it away, why do people buy it? I mean, really, I mean,
Well,
not.
Okay, well, think about it.
Realistically.
Think about it. Think of the prevalence of trafficking. I wouldn't even go into survival sex.
No.
Let's talk trafficking because we're talking about trafficking. Think of the number of individuals, men and women, boys and girls, who are trapped in the cycle of trafficking. Where do they get? What keeps them there? Buyers.
Yeah. No. No.
200+ billion.
Yeah, where does that money come from? 200 billion. Let's bring it to the lower end. 200 billion. Where does it come from? Buyers. So at least once in their lifetime. 21%, I think that's a very conservative number, but I didn't write the numbers. I'm reporting it.
I don't think you're gonna get that.
Yeah. And then, it could be very low. High frequency buyers. So 75% of the market transaction are high frequency buyers. A man at age 21 makes their first purchase, generally speaking, average. And of course, buyers are more likely, like Lori said, to make over $100,000 annually. So it's men with means. Let's talk a little bit about what our survivors look like. Who are the others? So, of course, if you need to breathe, stretch and breathe. All right. People of color are survivors. Black and brown children are often seen as older than they are, and are usually sexualized at a younger age or seen as. Black males are seen as perpetrators instead of victims. 75% of children in Connecticut who are BIPOC, black and brown population, have experienced adverse childhood experiences. And that's the DCF statistic. So people of color are more vulnerable because of intergenerational racism and poverty. Males are also survivors. Nationally, boys account for 36% of victims. That is still very underreported. It could be more. In Connecticut, boys account for 8.7%. We still believe that is underreported. In 2018, the Global Report on Human Trafficking stated that boys make up 1 in every 3 trafficked minors. 1 in every 3 children who were trafficked was a boy. In Connecticut, 74 males were referred as victims of human trafficking from 2014 to 2018. And that doubled between 2017 to 2018. So why are males more vulnerable? What makes them vulnerable to trafficking? More boys are likely to be considered runaways. More boys are likely to engage in survival sex. And more men and boys are more likely to be charged with a crime. Survivors are also LGBTQIA+. They account for 40% of homeless youth and are twice as likely to have run away from home. Of course, we know queer individuals are more likely to experience police brutality and ostracization, which instills fear and the feeling that they have no one to reach out for help, making them feel isolated. There's a stigma that they have to deal with. 40% of homeless youths are LGBTQ. Okay, I did say that. Which makes them really vulnerable to traffickers, to being trafficked. And so we're going to talk about what do we do to help survivors? Survivors of human trafficking need, they have basic needs: food, clothing, and shelter. They need ongoing support and encouragement. They need to learn independent living skills. They need access to health care. They need to be bridged to other survivors. And that's what we do at the underground with our adult mentor program. We offer mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual support to survivors. We do that through a 4-phase program. Phase 1 is the moment of exiting exploitation. Um, a lot of our clients come to us referred to from hospitals, police departments. Very few of them call us directly. Most those who are coming are from agencies. Those are coming from a hospital, from a police department, or call us directly. Or even if they're referred to by another agency, but they're leaving their trafficker, that point of exploitation, they leave with absolutely nothing. They have nothing and nowhere. So what we do in our program is we provide what we call emergency housing. For the first 7 to 10 days of exit, we work with them, first of all, to ascertain trafficking. We have to confirm that they were trafficked. There are some of them we find out, okay, so this was just domestic violence. So we refer them to a domestic violence organization. Or this person just has a drug problem and is crying out for help. Yes, there was some abuse, but there was no trafficking. There was maybe some sexual abuse, there was physical abuse, but there was no trafficking based on our definition of trafficking. And so they are referred out. But if there is confirmed trafficking, so within those 7 days, everybody is in that emergency housing that the underground pays for. Unfortunately, now we are using hotels, not the safest place. And Lori had firsthand experience. You want to share that, Lori?
Yeah, so I don't get to interact with our clients very often, but there was a call for, we had somebody who had been a former Connecticut resident, but had moved to the West Coast and was trafficked on the West Coast. She wanted to come home. So they reached out to the underground and we said, yes, we will take her in. And so she flew out. And I live close to the airport, so I picked her up. It was at midnight. Her flight came in at midnight. And it was a sort of a rushed sort of a scenario. And so we don't always get to know, like we go by the reviews of what hotels are. So we had booked her a hotel near the airport and I brought her there and it really broke my heart to leave her there. It was a hotel, it was a Days Inn. It was dirty. It smelled. It was, it just was not a place that probably any of us would have wanted to stay in. And it really made me sad because we have to put them in hotels. That's the best we can do right now. But somebody who's starting a new life and who traveled all day long to get here and was exhausted and tired. And I had to bring her to a room in a hotel that just wasn't what you would want for her. And then I don't think any of us would have wanted to be in that situation. So it's not the best scenario, but that's what we can do right now for them. So,
Yeah.
and we won't send anybody back to that hotel now that we know.
Yeah, and that happens. We've had situation where in the middle of the night, a mentor has to go to take that individual from that hotel because, incidents happen. And we have to move them in the middle of the night to another hotel. So one of the things we're working on right now is to get a house that we can use as emergency housing. And that's emergency housing is usually 10. We try to keep it at a minimum of 10 days because we have to pay every day for that hotel. But sometimes it may go on to 20 days, 21 days, 3 weeks. And So yeah, just a little plug there. We're looking for a house. And then so after we've confirmed that yes, this individual has been trafficked, then we offer our program to this individual. And if they agree, then they move into phase two. And what we do is we remove them from the hotel and we put them into a house, into housing that caters to their primary need. So yes, I've been trafficked, but I also have had it was a violent traffic. So I have domestic violence, or so that's more prevalent in that individual's life. Or there is drug abuse, that's more prevalent. Or I'm pregnant, that's more prevalent. Or I have children, that's more prevalent. So whatever is the most prevalent need, we place them accordingly in-house. And we've developed partnerships with houses across the state. We're still looking for more partnerships. Um, that we can connect our clients to. And so that's in that transition state. In that state, they meet with their mentors. They set SMART goals. They are connected with medical and our goal is to get them in their own place. And when they're in phase three, we offer them rent support, of course, again, out of our pocket. And we help them with rent on a graded basis. So we might start out depending on the need of the individual, and but that's the highest we go is 70%. We may pay 70% of an individual's rent, and after 3 months, after 6 months, we get down to 50. After 3 months, we reduce it to 30 until they're eventually paying their rent for themselves. But by phase three, that individual should be in their home, should have a job, or are going to school or both, depending on what they need. Also, in between phase two and three, what we have found is that we have to teach them a lot of things. So there's a lot of life skills that we have to share with them, teach them, and so that is something that we're trying to bring into the program, a formal life skills sub program where they are taught basic things. We've had clients that we've had to teach how to fry an egg, how to make a bed, how to hold a broom to sweep. Because, there's a lot of little things that they have to learn. Besides, things like, well, they're taught budgeting, of course, how to manage their money, how to make good decisions with their purchases, how to make good decisions about life choices as a whole, and how to prepare for a job interview and how to behave while having a job. And phase four is where we party because by that time they're independent. They have met all their SMART goals. They have demonstrated a level of independence with their mentors checking in once per month or once every 2 months, depending on the strength or or the growth of that individual. They're working. They are now paying, if not 100% of their rent. They're paying 80% of their rent, and they're just making very good choices. And then we have a little graduation, and we throw a little party, and we celebrate their success. Over 80% of the underground's clients have left exploitation after meeting the underground. I remember I mentioned earlier that I think you had asked a question, or one of you had asked a question about do they go back or do they disconnect from their trafficker? Over 80%, and that's very conservative. But we just like to keep it at 80. Have once they've come into that phase one where we're doing the assessment, some of them will go back. But we have one or two who go back to their trafficker, who just feels that the program is too much. There's one such individual just last week. We worked with her. We had her in the hotel for 2 weeks. And then she decided, listen, this is too hard. I want to go back to my trafficker. I don't want to go into any of the houses you're referring to. I just listen, I'll just go back to my trafficker. And she did. The good thing is she's still in contact with our mentors. So they're still home. We still have that connection with her. Um, but our goal is to get them out of that situation completely.
So, so some of the people you said that will use debt to hold it over them.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
Short
but you
answer,
know
yes,
those
we do.
bankers, they
Well,
want their money.
thank you. It is a long road. It is a long road. I mean, we've had situations where a mentor would report that we went to court and the public defender had no clue what trafficking or what this lady meant by I was trafficked. So the mentor had to ask her for request a, is it a stay? I don't know the legal conversations they have in court. And so she was able to sit with this legal defender and say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what trafficking is. This is what this young lady has been through. Because a lot of them really don't understand. Like you said, you have my money, I want my money. You did the crime, you should do the time. But until they're educated on trafficking and what the trafficker experiences and why this could have happened to this individual. Yeah. So in 2023, our mentors, oh wow, this needs to be updated. Because in 2024, we spent over 2,000 hours with survivors providing intentional one-on-one mentoring. You have over 90% of mentees of our clients exited exploitation after meeting a mentor, 1890. And all of them are still out of the life after a year with the underground. And one of the things we do in our program, one of the focus is to make sure they have stable housing, because we understand that any kind of instability, housing instability can cause recidivism and send them right back to their traffickers. Yeah.
So there's a housing crisis
Mhm.
in the state of Connecticut. So I have trouble helping people get housing.
Mhm.
So do you get special dispensation or how does that work? I mean, the lists are long and a lot.
It
of
is
houses-
long. It is long. And so what happened is our clients tend to stay longer in these homes because it's very hard
I know.
to get housing. And so that's one of our part of our strategic planning going forward is one of the things we did not want to do was to get involved with housing,
Yeah.
providing residential services. But that's something we're considering now because of what we're seeing out there.
Like in Danbury on Main Street, they're gonna be building a lot of affordable housing on South Street. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know what's happening with that. It's all relative.
Yeah.
Of-
Yes,
of-
yes, yes.
Of those that have been
It's that our clients who return as mentors.
sure, they can say, don't tell me, I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
And luckily, right now, two of our mentors have lived experience, so they can do that.
Human trafficking. One, I like to share with the church, know that human trafficking is a 250, not 150 billion-dollar international industry. Human trafficking is a great moral evil that has corrupted the heart. The church needs to know that human trafficking is a well-networked organization. Law enforcement, immigration, taxi drivers, the man next door, it is a very well networked. Human trafficking is massive, it's pervasive, and it is truly, truly evil. The church needs to know that human trafficking is driven by lust and greed, that human trafficking is injustice, and God hates injustice. It is evil in the sight of God. And the church also needs to know that human trafficking is a spiritual problem. And because human trafficking is a spiritual problem, the church must get involved. And so the church's response should be that the fight against human trafficking is the mission of God, the gospel. The church should know that a spiritual problem can only have spiritual solution. The church must lead the way because true justice and freedom is only found in Christ. Freedom and justice are why Jesus Christ came to this earth. He came to bring freedom from sin and to establish justice through the cross. We're not fighting against flesh and blood, as Ephesians 6 verse 12 tells us. It's a spiritual battle. Isaiah 1 verse 17 says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. So God places a high value on those who are oppressed in our society. A righteous God who loves justice has called the church to fight injustice. And that's what human trafficking is. So practical ways, how does the church respond? Start a prayer team or join the underground prayer team on the second Friday of each month. Become a freedom ambassador, and Laura will talk more about that, and help raise awareness in your own sphere of influence, or create platforms that the underground can come to speak at. Or a church can become a care sponsor to an underground survivor client. A church can become a monthly or quarterly or yearly donor, or raise individuals who will become monthly donors of the underground's programs and operations. A church or individuals within a church can become a freedom ally and sign up as a volunteer that Sarah can tell you about. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter to keep up to date on our impact, our challenges, our wins, and how God is using this organization to change lives. And share what you heard tonight. Tell somebody, tell another church, another organization, and tell them about the underground and about human trafficking, and we'd be happy to take it from there. So I've mentioned about volunteers and about our partnerships.
Yeah, sure. You want me to break? So yeah, so our freedom sponsors, there's Freedom Church partners that sometimes they in-kind donations, they do gift card drives, they support financially, they provide opportunities for awareness events. There's Freedom Care Partners, they provide basic needs to a survivor in any phase of their care. That can be a church, a community, if you belong to different groups, organizations, or an individual.
So basically, a freedom care partner or a church sponsor actually adopts a survivor.
Yeah.
So, you know,
An
that
adoption program.
is right. It's an adoption program where a church provides, just fulfill the need of that particular individual.
And that can range anywhere from art supplies to they're interviewing and they need a new outfit or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we have individuals and companies with a passion for our mission and operations that, as Nadine said, can sponsor monthly, quarterly, or be an annual donor. Go ahead and see the next slide. So I'm sure.
I want to, you can do it, you can show
Oh,
it.
so I just wanted to share a few things that are on our table over there that might be of interest to you. This is a flyer that's over there, and it talks about the church and the human trafficking and how we can be involved and what we can be doing to help this. So there's those on the table. There's also prayer points. We were founded on prayer, and prayer is a huge part of our ability to keep this ministry alive and this mission alive, and it sustains us as we do the work. So you can pick up a prayer card, and then we have our pig roast, which, and I know Pam said it's a little bit of a hike for you, but my charge is I have to sell 50 tickets to our pig roast by next Thursday. So I'm going to share it just in case you're interested. And all of the proceeds from this event, they will be, they go to support our program and our survivors. And I just have to say one thing, there's great food, great auction items, some art by our clients. They're all very artistically, have an artistic bent, so they're providing artwork to auction off. But I really I'm a musician, so I really want to stress the music that's going to be there. We have a drummer and record producer who's worked with the likes of Gloria Estefan, Mary Chapin Carpenter, and several blues bands that would be well known. We have a pianist who is the chair at Berklee School of Music, and Chris, who is a Blues Hall of Famer. So great music. So if you're all interested, I have some flyers about that too. Yeah.
And then Sarah, look at that. Talk about volunteers.
So I just came on recently as the volunteer program manager. We are doing a little bit of a refresh of the program, but for the most part, the information on the website and in the brochure and on the slide is current. So the general categories are there's ambassadorism, which is speaking on behalf of the organization, looking for inroads for us to be able to come in and do events or have a new platform to speak about these issues. Another one is event support. So anytime that there is an event, you can just come in and be a part of the operational staff of that event. There are a need for movers and drivers and general inventory management. We get a lot of donations. Sometimes there are big packages that just need to be picked up and transported. We also manage a lot of the stuff that comes in through our office, and that has a consistent need for organizing. So that's a lower end commitment. It doesn't require a lot of labor, but it's very necessary. Others, yeah, are out there. Outreach partners is going to be subsumed into another category. I won't go into all the categories, but if you want to come up to the table afterwards or speak to me afterwards, I can talk to you a little bit more. We can take information down if you are interested in volunteering. Yep.
You take donations to clothes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to chuckle. We often get that, and we would love to. We do not have office space, so we have a very small storage space right at the moment. So we can take some. I just, just depends on how much it is.
Your clients in Florida, one is the local, which one?
Well, we're based in the Hartford area. So we use food pantries and clothing closets there too. And then
What, Savers up there?
we do, yeah.
So they give the vouchers and say.
Oh, that's cool to know. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, they do it down there.
Wonderful. Yeah, so I hate to say no, but sometimes we do take donations, but it's just, we have to be really careful because we do not have any space right now.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm just gonna share this very short video about, it's just a collection of testimonials from some of our clients that we've served over the years.
Connection. We crave it. And there are people who take advantage of that. And they usually don't care if you're already broken.
Nobody knows what that life is like. And in the underground, they understand the people like me who are survivors that work with survivors just for that reason. The underground thing helped me so much with my journey. It took one conversation of admitting what was going on for my whole life to change. It's a beautiful thing to be able to move forward in life and to not have to look back anymore. It's amazing that people are going to be getting the help that I didn't have at the time. If I had that help, I probably would have stopped what I was doing a lot sooner.
I don't know if this would have made sense to me if I was not trafficked, but as being a survivor and to have those available, I'm almost 50 years old and I don't have a GED. What happens if I had a tutor 20 years ago? Why did I have to learn how to read and write in prison? This spares the pain of so many, and we will create a place that someone can come and be broken. Someone can come and not have to pretend and have that happen without any expectations, without any demands, with gentle hands, or something like that would have changed my life.
I personally am honored to be working with others and helping them on their pathway to healing and freedom. And I couldn't honestly imagine doing anything else.
We already started the race. We just need the endurance. We need the backing to finish this, to stay on straight so we can help those that are unseen. When it comes to the people that give, they're not just buying a house or an office space. They're saving lives and souls. Every dime they put in there is to find a survivor who's lost.
So we want to thank you so much. Well, if there's any more questions, we can take a few more, but before we do that, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity and for your patience and for your attention. And we really hope that you've learned something today that you can take back and share. And we just thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have any last questions that you'd like to ask?
Do you have any brochures to give us this phone number?
There, everything is on our
the
table.
table?
Yep, we have all kinds of material out there for you.
And there is lunch.
And before we move, can I close this out?
Yes.
Father, I first ask that I get through this without crying. Lord God, let us remember that you are always right beside us. And we ask that you particularly be with those that are being trapped. Give them the confidence and courage to step forward and utter those words, we need help. I especially ask you that you be with these servants that are volunteering. That when they wake up in the middle of the night, tears, you comfort and love them. With your grace, we can put it that such a horrific. We love you, we praise you, we thank you. Amen. Amen. They did it.